Well, it's an honor to do this. I've known John for a while now, gotten to know him quite well. And for the audience's benefit, what I do know about John is he looks angry right now, but he's not. It's just resting John face that I've gotten to know. I'm sure that most of the people who have registered for this know who you are, but I'm going to give a quick background. You've got over 16 years experience in what we just call cyber these days, in various roles, but a lot of them in the intelligence space. And you, along that whole period, you've been, fairly good at writing about and researching and getting to know the people on the other side, right? And that's really come to fruition with Ransomware Diaries. I think hopefully most of the attendees have read some of those and have the context, but we'll talk about that in a second. I mean, you're obviously, like the rest of us, you have a day job too. You're the senior security strategist for Analyst One, and you're also an accomplished author. In fact, I have a copy. The Art of Cyber Warfare. If you want to learn about what John does and how he does it, So I work at a cyber intelligence company, and this is recommended, almost required reading for my analyst team on tools and tactics on cyber espionage and how to interact with bad guys. And this book actually got some notoriety. Is won the SANS Difference Maker Award. So good reading there. Obviously, you really took the tools from this book, John, and put them to work with the Ransomware Diaries series. And so, if you read the book first and then read Ransomware Diaries, you can kind of see the tools and tactics that you talk about in the book in action, and how you embed yourself with the bad guys and or the threat actors. I guess we shouldn't be punitive, right? Some of these guys are, maybe they're not all bad guys. I don't know. But as a result of your work with Ransomware Diaries, you've been featured on 60 Minutes and CNN and Bloomberg and a bunch of other places. You really made a name for yourself for talking to bad guys. And I picked an excerpt because I wanted to give a quick example of the tactical sort of nature of this book. So in one of the chapters, you're kind of giving tips on attribution, which I thought were really useful. And as an intelligence team, our analysts are always trying to do meaningful attribution work. And you spell out in the book in several places like mistakes that are commonly made. So I just wanted to pull a little section out of here where you say, don't attribute based on publicly available hack tools. And you say one of the most significant trends in recent targeted attacks is for the attacker to live off the land. And what you mean there is that they're already present in the environment, right? And at sort of the summarize of the chapter where you're talking about why you don't attribute, you say whenever you're conducting attribution, keep in mind that you should always look at the larger picture. If the attack uses malware you believe is unique to a specific threat group, but other TTPs and or targeting are different, this may indicate the activity is not from the same group. And I think we've seen this play out in the media with other researchers where they jump really quick to these conclusions. Yeah. And it's easy to do. It's an easy mistake to make, but the book is full of stuff like that. So if you're a practitioner, it's required reading.
Thanks.
And then a little bit more on the intro side before we talk about Ransomware Diaries. John and I, we've both been in the industry a very long time, and we've got a pretty strong network in the industry. And we had a mutual colleague who met us both in separate circumstances and said, you guys need to know each other. And I'm glad that happened. I think we're both better for it, but maybe I got the better deal than John.
You say so.
So, just start to talk about the Ransomware Diaries series. Just before we get to the specifics on Ransomware Diaries 5, can you talk a little bit about what started this? Like how you, what started, did you start with the idea of writing a 5-part series, or did you just kind of stumble into a circumstance that sort of snowballed on you? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it really, what it came from is, I wrote content with the exact same approach, tactics, and content that's very similar to what you see today for years prior. And one of the problems that I had is, they would get some buzz when they first came out, and they would just sort of, fade off, and I'd come up with another one, or to be a different sort of, to be, some overlap in audience. But I really wanted a way to sort of tie things together. So every time I wrote something, I didn't have to be like, hey, remember, go check this other report that I wrote. So though I didn't consciously do it, part of it was like a branding method to have the work under one collection. But again, at the time, I didn't realize I wasn't connecting those dots. But that's essentially, what I wanted to do, is have a way to tie everything together. What I didn't intend to happen was for 4 out of the 5 of them to be about LockBit. That I sort of, I don't want to say fell into, because I did it with direct intent, but I got so far and I grew a relationship with him that it just kept going, and I became, whether this is good or bad, a part of that story. So I couldn't stop. Spent 2 years in deep with that, and it was just too good of content and too good of a story to not tell. And the one thing that is different about the Ransomware Diaries compared to some of my other work is, with the Ransomware Diaries, if I'm going to put it in that series, it's got to be a good story. I really like and love writing and telling stories. So I want there to be intelligence value. I want to have IOCs. I want to have great unknown finds and things people don't know, and I want to connect dots. But at the end of the day, it won't be in there if I don't think I can make it an entertaining story as well.
Yeah, when I reread them to prepare for this talk or this interview, I kind of kept putting myself in your head, and I'm like, man, you're in the middle of the night, you're doing this research, or you're talking to these folks tactically, and I'm trying to imagine what it's like to be like in the story, like almost like a choose your own adventure book in the story. And so you're probably projecting like where you think this will go, or like, if I talk to this person and they give me this information, it's going to look like this in the book. Are you able to sort of predict in your head, what in the moment, like what's going to go on paper, or does it always end up being a surprise to you when you start writing it?
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good question. So I spend so the way I do it is, the first thing I do is what I call like literature review. I want to go through and read everything that's already out there. I don't want to redo work if it's already been done. And of course, I always credit, whoever's done that work. But I go through and I read everything that's out there, because often they're most of the time they're articles or research that's based off of one or just a few attacks. And I always try to look at the big picture. But the next thing I do then is I go and I research. I try to pivot off of those things. Then I do engagements, take that information, and then I do my analysis. I create a timeline of significant events, start creating my findings. But every single time when I do this, where the real secret sauce or magic takes place is when I start to write it. I don't know why, but it's when I write it that I make all these correlations that I didn't make during the research and analysis phase. It's just dots start to connect. And part of that is sort of like the critical thinking aspect of it. You have data, you've done analysis, but the big thing that I feel like I've done well with the Ransomware Diaries is the critical thinking aspect of looking at all these things and putting together theories, and then realizing all the dots that connect, and then filling in the gaps of what I think happened with the human aspect by talking to people. And while that might not be high confidence because you're getting it's word of mouth type of thing, it allows me, by all the other things I did, to see if it fits and it makes sense. And then I just got to clarify that in the writing, but it allows me to really fill in gaps and tell the longer term story of this threat actor, and that's sort of what puts it together, and how it's done and conducted, I guess, behind the scenes.
Sure. Sure. And I mean, if I solicit a couple of tips for other practitioners or other would-be intelligence operators, I mean, I think one of the things I heard you say there is there's some real benefit, almost cognitive benefit to the actual writing this down. It's almost like when like therapists tell you to write in a journal, right? Because you actually end up talking to yourself in this new way and you start seeing things differently. So is there anything you could add to that around the writing it down?
Yeah, well, so even not everybody loves to write or is effective at it. But even if you're not writing for a production report, one of the things I do is every day is I have, a journal, and I document, the threat actors I talked to, security analysts I talked to, relevant points. And so that allows me also to go back, through these, let's say I work on this, let's say 3 or 4 months, to go back through and see on what days I talked with who and what they said, and if I didn't remember it, but just sort of writing everything down, even if it wasn't in for, a production report that everybody's going to see. I think there's value there. But while it's hard to explain, it's sort of the mind process of when you're trying to write it in a report, of putting these things in chronological order and figuring out what fits where. And for whatever reason, during that process, I just kind of realized. I'll give you an example. In volume 1, I didn't realize that who the developer was, and his longer term previous role in what the research I had doing for years, like looking at his comments and the feed and the things that he said. Like, I didn't put all together that the same persona, if you will, that was on some of these forums was the same person that he was talking about. And it wasn't until I was writing about it that I started to realize that, and that allowed me to go and track that person, back to, other activity, Fin7 and some other, Black Matter and some other groups that I just didn't all connect until I was writing it. And it was that putting it in order and looking at all the connections, and then again that sort of critical thinking piece of realizing what's what, and then putting that down. And one thing I want to say, what I don't see as much today as I would like to with reporting is to be a good analyst, you have to be an analyst. You have to do analytical thinking. You have to be able to take your expertise, your knowledge of what you just did, and have some sort of a analytical conclusion or a theory. And I feel like a lot of people are afraid of looking foolish or being wrong. There's nothing wrong with having something wrong. You just clarify, this is my, theory, and it's based on A, B, and C. You can even give it a confidence assessment, but I don't see people take that next step. And I think that is one of the keys to the success that I have is taking those. I don't want to call it a risk, because it's really just part of the practice of being a good intelligence analyst and researcher, but taking that step, put yourself out there a little bit. You are the expert. You did just review all this. You did all the work. People want to know that opinion. Don't just document the events of an attack and move on. It loses a lot of value that you could add to it by taking that next step.
Yep. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I wanted to talk about before we get into the specifics of Ransomware Diaries 5 is, and I've observed this outside of just Ransomware Diaries from knowing you and working with you tactically, but you have kind of a code that you operate by, and I think there's a multiple sort of layers to that code, but not just sort of your opinions on how to be a great analyst, or the best way to document these things, but also a code of ethics, and how I imagine that you're walking a fine line a lot of times when you're talking to these guys, and that code of ethics goes in both directions. It's like you have a code of ethics to the greater society, but you also have a code of ethics, for better or for worse, with the threat actor that you're speaking to.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about that fine line and how I'm sure it's difficult, but can you kind of talk about the difficulties there?
Absolutely. So being a person that for years, I did intelligence, and then for years I did threat hunting, literally live on systems, chasing bad guys, both nation state and ransomware. And one thing that I didn't really understand until I started talking to them, that you lose, is when you're always looking at the zeros and ones and you're always chasing them, it just becomes this much more, benign routine thing. And, as I talk to people, to threat actors, both with fake personas and myself, it added a depth to it. It added a lot of clarity to it. And it's strange, but until you do it, you're not going to understand whether they're bad guys or not. You grow a relationship with some of them, especially if you talk to them frequently. So going back to answering your question, there is a code, and that code is there for 2 reasons. It's one, you don't want to get yourself in trouble. You don't want to put yourself in a bad position where you have some threat actor coming at you. 2, you don't want to get yourself fired for doing the wrong thing or saying the wrong thing. And three, whether they're bad guys or not, they're still human beings, and you want to be an ethical person. Just because they do bad things doesn't mean that you should. So it makes it difficult, but there are times where threat actors will tell me something, and they'll ask me to please not share that in reporting. I will honor that. That happened in the Ransomware Diaries 4, where I was asked to not share something and I didn't. And then unsolicited, another threat actor gave me all this background detail on that. And so I did move forward with it. But even with that, I had a conversation with the initial threat actor and was like, hey, I'll put the whole transcript in the report. This was not solicited, but such and such told me this, and I can't just ignore that. But I guess what my point is that there are certain rules that I do, both to stay ethical, keep myself safe, not put my company at jeopardy, and also to treat them like humans, whether you agree with that or not. That's always the approach I do, and I have found that most of them are humans. They have bad days, good days. They have family, personal problems, other things. They're criminals, but there still is always a side to them that is a human side, and you get attached sometimes to some of these guys. But the most important part of that code is I always do my job. I always tell them if I'm going to them as me, I always tell them my intent up front. Yeah, and I make sure that they've read and know the type of work that I'm going to do. Still, they're often surprised when I come out and get upset once I come out with a product. But the point is that they know what's coming. Now, if it's a fake persona, that's a whole different story. There's different goals and objectives and tactics. But the code still would apply across it. It's just would be a little bit different because your goal and your intent, you're starting with a layer of deceit that you're not when you're talking to them as yourself. But that code is important.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that just hearing you say all this made me think, it's really imbalanced. Your level of integrity and transparency when dealing with someone who doesn't offer you the same is is fascinating. And then you take that, you look at that imbalance, you apply it to the outcomes from the Ransomware Diaries, and it's amazing how you've still managed to navigate all that and get them to tell you things that maybe they wouldn't tell other people and things like that. It's amazing.
And that's because I'm genuine with them. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not misleading them. The relationships that I have are real. I'm not just making it up to get a story out of it. I don't consider myself a journalist. I consider myself a researcher. But before all of that, I was somebody who many years ago gotten in a situation where I was in a lot of trouble and thought my life was going to change forever, and somebody gave me a second chance, and I associated with a lot of people, will just say, in low places, and I've always been drawn to that. I did military police, did undercover work. Even the friends that I have, except for you, of course, Curtis, sometimes are a little bit on the unsavory side. And I just, that appeals to me. I enjoy talking to hackers and criminals more than I do with my corporate peers. No offense, everybody, but I just understand and empathetic, can relate. But on top of that, I also want to get these guys, and that chase drives me. And it's a balance, those two things. And it's a weird place to be in that I don't think a lot of people understand, but it's very difficult to balance that. But the day I can't do my job, or that I don't do my job, is the day that I know I need to stop talking and doing engagements. But so far, I always, even when it's difficult, I always do my job and put stuff out.
I gotta say, I mean, you wear it well, considering all the difficulties. And there's always that, that sort of cheesy adage, but it's so true that, you spend a lifetime, building up your honor, integrity, your reputation, and it only takes a minute to ruin it all. And I think, the line that you're walking is a tough one, and you've done a great job. So kudos. And then, let's get into Ransomware 5 a little bit. The things, the whole series of Ransomware Diaries 5 starts with, the beginning of the end, right? Just to get to the punchline, right? Is it the beginning of the end? Is it the end? Is it?
Right. I hope so. I hope so. Sorry, I'll let you ask your question.
No, that's it. I have a follow-up regarding the enforcement.
To answer your question, is it the beginning of the end? So the beginning of the end for the Ransomware Diaries is at the end. I don't think so. The LockBit story, There may be one more. It depends. I'm working on that now. It depends how things go. But if there is one more, that will be it for me and LockBit. And depending on how this research goes, I may not publish if I don't get what I'm trying to get out of it. And then that would be the end of my LockBit story, but it's been 2 years. There's now like over 300 pages of content on it that I've published. I think it's time to move on, but regardless, it's the perfect ending because I said in volume 1, when I began this, I said I have a story to tell, and that's the first line of the report. And I talk about how I want to get this guy, and I'm going to chase them, and I'm going to try to take them down. And now we're at this ending. Not that I'm the one law enforcement takes them down, but you get what I'm saying. Now we're at the end. It's the perfect ending because it was literally in it helping to chase this guy on my own, which in turn helped, law enforcement with chasing the guy as well. And here we are with a perfect ending to that story. There'll be something next, but I am getting burnt out, and I am going to take a break from the Ransomware Diaries. I mean, I'm doing this research right now that might turn into one more, but I'm going to have a break after that, and I'm going to do some other types of research that probably won't be as cool for everybody, but I'll come back to the Ransomware Diaries. I just need a break for a while.
That's all relative though, right? It's all relative. And of course, like we just learned, you never know, right? You're in the story, you choose your own adventure kind of thing. You mentioned law enforcement. I'm sure you get accused of collaborating with them on occasion by threat actors.
Right.
I think this operation, the operation that law enforcement carried out on LockBit, partially, powered by some of the research and work you did. It's one of the first ones where at least we've really publicly seen a psychological operation employed at such a large scale. Can you talk about that for a second? Like and I think that what just to give you a sort of where I'm going with this is, I want to talk about who LockBit is as a person a little bit, and I think the psychological operation, was unique because of who the target was, right?
Right. Yeah. To the first part of that, yes, that is sometimes a problem where threat actors start to think that I'm actually law enforcement. And the truth is, and this makes sense to most people watching this, if I was law enforcement, I certainly wouldn't be writing everything publicly and putting everything out that I find. That look how law enforcement works. That's generally not what they do. Even with this indictment, one of the biggest headaches I have is they didn't probably have any evidence to show how they got to where they get. And
as someone, I want to echo this for the audience. As someone who is a ransomware responder myself, deals on an almost daily basis with some form of law enforcement, often the FBI. I can testify that they're largely one directional.
Right.
I respect them, but they're not very collaborative.
Right. And, we have partnerships, and, there are times where I'll literally tell a threat actor, yeah, I had a meeting, this afternoon with the FBI, and they'll be like, well, why? I thought you're not part of the FBI. And I have to explain to them, well, I'm not, but companies have partnerships. You can go Google this. This isn't something secret or anything else, but that doesn't mean that I'm part of some law enforcement investigation or I'm part of their task force or anything like that. I guess the big part of it with law enforcement is, they have access to tools and resources, that we don't. I used to live that life, and when I did do work for a government intelligence agency, so I know what they have what their capabilities are and what they can do. So I believe when they come out, they're not going to indict and have sanctions on someone unless they're pretty sure and have some good evidence. But I also know that they're not going to make that public, and unless the person is arrested, which is unlikely, that's never going to see daylight. Which made the Ransomware Diaries 5 hard, because all the other ones, even when a threat actor just told me something, I would try to present the facts and things to either support or to show that what they're saying is not true. But with law enforcement, there's just like a curtain, so it makes it difficult. That's what I'm doing right now, is trying to link some evidence up to that attribution for Dmitry, the guy they named in the indictment. Hopefully I'll find something, but if I don't, it won't change my opinion of whether or not this is him or not.
Right.
It's just of what I can find that's publicly available, and we don't always have those same resources. So I may not find it. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to talk about Dmitry as a person, like I said, in a second, but you mentioned, one of the things that made Ransomware Diaries 5 hard. I was, firsthand witness to some of the other reasons that it was hard, but I think we were at RSA, and the timing of this was really sort of inconvenient for you. Can you talk about that? Like how you had to kind of rush some of this?
Yeah, so I always do deconfliction with various government agencies, and I do that to make sure that I'm not going to publish something that's going to jeopardize an active investigation. At the end of the day, their work is more important than mine. In doing so, they asked me not to publish and to hold off, so I did. And then they called me on a Friday and they were like, okay, we've got something, big that's going to be coming down the pipe next week, early next week. So I hope you can write fast. So the Ransomware Diaries 5, I had been doing research for, but I hadn't actually started writing it because I didn't think that time was going to come for a while. And so it was a Friday. I was leaving at like 4 a.m. on Monday to fly out to RSA. So I was up for 3 days straight trying to document everything, write everything out, and get that out the door. And I just remember landing, going to my room. It was like 9 in the morning or 10 in the morning their time in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And just sitting there, and I didn't leave, I didn't eat, I was literally there until the next morning, 7 a.m. The indictment came out. And I think it was an hour later we released the Ransomware Diaries. Hadn't gone through editing. It had not a lot, some grammar and some formatting issues. I mean, it hadn't been seen by anybody else. Julia helped me, but besides that, nobody else saw it. And it was just one of those things where, I didn't know if it was crap or not, because I normally spend so much time with my writing and making sure it's exactly the voice, the tone, the story, the flow that I want. And this was just after a couple of days of not sleeping, it was like banging your head against the wall. I just didn't know if what I had was going to be any good. And I also didn't know if the guy that I had found was going to be the same person they indicted. So if it wasn't, all that work would have been for naught, and it would have just never seen daylight. So once we saw it was the same guy, we were like, yeah, let's pull the trigger on this and get this published.
Jackpot. Yeah, nice. Bullseye is a better one. Bullseye.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, just for fun, I mean, is it just coffee? You're a nighttime person. I'm not. Like, I'm a morning person. There's no way I'd be able to stay up 3 days in a row. There's no way. But like, is it just coffee? How do you do it? Do you do like stand up and do like jumping jacks and then sit back down and?
It's the opposite. It's a curse. I'm an insomniac. I'm naturally awake at night. It's the daytime that I have to get up and do jumping jacks. I was up last night working until 3 in the morning. It was so difficult to get up this morning. I actually didn't roll out of bed until like 9:30. It was just so my natural rhythm is just off. So staying up at night and working, that's actually when I do my best work. My brain works. I'm the most effective. Wow. But I can't always do that because sometimes, a lot of times, I have other things that are not research related during the day, whether they're media related or whether they're meetings or whatever.
Like this.
This, exactly, like this. So that makes it hard because sometimes I'm just exhausted, and I'll force myself, I'll take a sleeping pill or something to force myself to go to sleep at a decent time. But then I end up going where I'm not being productive with my research, because that's really when I get it done. So that's when I'm the most awake.
It sort of messes up the rhythm, right? It kind of messes up the rhythm or the cadence. Wow, man.
But for your personal life, it sucks because you're working late at night and you want to sleep in late. Yeah, it's hard. And it's hard for work because a lot of times somebody wants to have a meeting in the morning, which I normally do, but sometimes it's like I'm just a zombie drooling because,
Yeah, my team knows, we have international customers, we have customers in Asia and stuff. And if there's meetings in Asia and it's like in the middle of the night, they're like, no, Curtis is not your guy. Curtis is not your guy in the middle of the night. But 4 a.m., I'm awake at 4 a.m. That's my spot. But like, I don't know how you do it. So back to Dmitry. I don't want to push any buttons or anything, so you just tell me if I go in the wrong direction here. But generally speaking, right after the FBI had sort of done their overture, he's sort of, I think you called it the resurrection or something. He bounces back and makes his own claims. And just having, read the whole series, like none of that surprises any of us, right? I do feel like he was playing very much into the psyops operation when he did that. Tell us a little bit about him and his personality as you've gotten to know him, almost like a friend in some ways, over the last, couple of years.
Yes. So, I agree. When in February, when the takedown happened, I knew that he wasn't going to rebrand, and he bounced back quick, and he did. And 5 days later, he got, the site up and running, again, on different infrastructure. And, so when it came, to May, when there was the next takedown, or not takedown, but next event, one of the things I think a lot of people missed is they brought the old LockBit site back up. The FBI or NCA brought
Right.
the old LockBit site up on the day of that they did. It was a Sunday, and if you're a religious person, you might get this, but it was the day that Christ had risen, it was being celebrated throughout the world as a resurrection, and they resurrected the site on that day to take him down. I don't know if that was intentional, but I don't
Yeah,
think anybody
it
talked
had
about
to
that. I
be.
thought that was
Yeah.
interesting. And yeah, my peer Anastasia, the one who pointed that out to me, but I thought that was a really interesting thing, if that was intentional. But yeah, so I have become friends with him. I have known him. I've also, there's some actors, threat actors I actually like and become friends with. This is someone I've never, I don't want to say I've never liked, but it is somebody who, you just get used to talking, water cooler talk. It's not always
Right.
about threat actor stuff. And yeah, you do start to grow a relationship, and we've had our ups and downs. But for
Can I
me,
just jump in and say, like what you said earlier about having this sort of empathy, that allows you to do this well? I think that is rare. But I also wanted to point out to the audience, and I have to point this out sometimes when I'm talking, because when we do our ransomware negotiations, for example, where yeah, I have a tremendous amount of empathy, meaning I can understand that other person's perspective very well. What I don't have is sympathy, and that's different.
right,
And
100%.
and I think that's what you're saying here basically is like, hey, I don't agree with this guy's, MO, but I
Yeah.
do understand where he's coming from, right? Kind of thing. Yeah.
So when I say empathy, one of the things I want to make very clear, it's empathy from the fact that these guys are going to have to be looking over his shoulders the rest of their lives. They've done these bad things. I always, sometimes to a fault, believe and try that I can at least maybe get them to consider going a different route, especially for the younger ones. Not so much with LockBit, but with
Yeah.
younger people which is a lot of them that I talk to. That's when I say that empathy, that I can understand sort of that feeling like, this is your only route that you have in life. This is the only thing that you can do. You don't have the same opportunity. You've had these hardships or whatever. I get that. But I also try to show them a better path so that they don't have to do this forever. It doesn't work so far, but it's
Right.
genuine, like, because I was
Yeah.
there at one point,
Yeah.
different
Well, it's good. It's
circumstances.
good karma, man. It's really good karma for sure.
So, yeah, it's authentic. I don't make that up.
Yeah.
But with Lockbit, we had, the Saint Ant when they attacked Saint Anthony's, Lockbit and I, talked about that, and I got really upset. That was in March of this 2024, I believe, February, maybe it was February. Anyway, I really believed I could get Lockbit to give them the decryption keys, because he did it previously with sick kids when the hospital where they had kids with cancer, they couldn't get treatment. And at the end of the day, even if you take my opinions and his out of it, he's still the ransom was really for the data. And so I thought, you can still do your criminal activity, but let these kids get back online and get help and the things that they need, and not just kids but other people with cancer that were at St. Anthony's
Right.
Hospital, and that needed treatment, and he just wouldn't do it. And he was just so greedy, and it got me really upset. So that was kind of the turning point in our relationship. So while I've never doxed anybody, and I kind of did that with him. Yes, the government put out his name, but I put out, everything on there on him: passport numbers, his home address, his phone numbers.
That iconic picture in front of the pool table.
Right, right. Yeah, what I didn't, put out is, I made sure to remove anything relating to family members and things like that.
Sure.
That's, again, one of those boundaries. But normally I wouldn't even put as much personal information on an actor out there, but just he was just such a bad guy, and the things that he did were so bad. I just wanted to get him, and I wanted him to feel like know what it's like to feel like a victim when all your information is put out there. And law enforcement did the indictment, adding all that context and additional information. It felt really good.
Yeah. Do you feel like that it actually materially impacted him?
It definitely did, because the phone lines that he was his cell phone, it was an iPhone, that was deactivated a day or two after the indictment. As far as his presence in running the LockBit program, I'm sure he's still there, but he used to take pride in the fact that the communication mechanism that he used to talk to, well, me, but more importantly, criminals who are actually conducting the attacks, the affiliates, he would always boast how he's got great customer service. They're always available to help with any of the attacks. And he's been offline or unavailable the majority of the time since the takedown. And that would never happen unless there were things going on in the background. Now, he's still there. I mean, the program is still there, but he is certainly preoccupied with other things as well right now, which is a good thing, because the more they're disrupted, the less time there is to focus on doing criminal acts with
Yeah.
ransomware.
Yeah. And I think, you're not a psychologist, but I think you probably have a knack for sort of, you know, sort of psychoanalysis on some of these folks and where their heads at. When I think about these threat actors, and the way that they operate, and I've dealt with some similar cases where they've attacked charities or cancer charities, things like this. And I always, try to think about like what is the motivation for this kind of activity? Obviously, part of it is money. There's, that's the obvious one, but like, are there other sort of motivators or other factors that are driving their behavior that make them feel like it's okay to do this? Obviously you already talked about like the economic circumstances, the lack of opportunity, maybe where they're at. But is there also like maybe a hate for the West, or some justification that makes them feel like it's okay to do this? When they look themselves in the mirror, they're like, I have a right to do this because, right? Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's definitely a disdain for the West, but it's not the main thing that drives them. Definitely money would be the first, but the other thing, it often is fame. They want their name out
It's
there.
ego.
They want exactly. I have not met, a threat actor yet that didn't have some level of narcissism. Some threat actors I've met have been completely batshit crazy, mentally ill, while others have just been a little bit mentally ill and off, but still have an underlying sense of what they're doing in reality. But they're all different, and that's part of what I do, is I have to assess that, because that makes a difference to the things that I say and to how seriously I take the things that they tell me. If there's somebody that always tells me crazy things, is on drugs, or is clearly mentally ill, I'll put less value in that than if I have somebody that is a very, like the leader of LockBit's a good example, a very intelligent, motivated criminal that knows exactly what he's doing. The ones that are more, he's not driven by emotion very often, is where there are other criminals I talk to that are very emotional. Those criminals that are very, very emotional, it's more personal to them what they're doing, as where the ones that are looking at it more for a business and making money aspect, it's not as personal. So the point in identifying that is, if you piss the ones off that are emotional, the repercussions tend to go much farther than the ones where it's just a business, unless of course you cost them money with that business, with the research that you do, then obviously that can change things as well.
Yeah, and you say that money is the number one, motivator, but like when we sort of dissect Dmitry and LockBit, Supp, the persona, he didn't really take advantage of the money, right? He
Yeah,
sat on
that's
it,
true.
and it looks like he's basically operating like in a normal lifestyle, maybe has a company, and like, why do you think that is?
So here's the thing about LockBit, and if you go look back at my previous research long before the indictment, you'll see this. I've always said that he, on forums and publicly portrays himself as this, gangster. He thinks he's like Tony Montana from Scarface. Like he literally tried to portray himself, the money, the cars, the women, all that stuff. And the guy that I got to know, that did not fit at all. So I would see those posts, but I knew that that was just, this persona he was putting out. Because the guy that I got to know was much more low key, much more calm, collective. Very rarely would have high rises in his emotions. He was just more simplistic. And so when we put a face to the guy, and it turns out that he hadn't spent a lot of money, and he spends a lot of his time doing other things, like he loves gardening, and just people, that's the reaction you just had is what most people have. But if you think about it, if you're more like in touch with just you want to silence things out, focus, it kind of fits with that. So the stuff that he was more low key, the profile that I did in Ransomware Diaries Volume 1, outside of the age, I got pretty correct on who Dmitry is. I thought that he would be closer to 40 because he was more mature. He didn't act on emotions. He wasn't living that gangster lifestyle, despite what he would put on the public. And so it really fit the guy. And so I'm not surprised that he didn't spend a lot of the money, because I think it's important to him to have the money, but buying material things that are, just to be flashy and show off, that didn't fit the
Right.
personality profile of the guy that I knew.
So based on the conversations you've had with him, now this is just pure speculation. I mean, do you feel like his longer term plan was to, pull a ripcord at some point and disappear on some island, or what do you think he was going to do long term? Not
No, I think
if he didn't end up in this circumstance, like what was his what do you think his head was at?
so honestly, this was almost the way I look at this, it was like a video game for him. He'd log into his computer, he'd become this different person, he would do his thing, and it eventually kind of overtook his life. But I don't think that that was like his plan his whole life, that he wanted to be this notorious criminal, but it became that. And I think that he liked the work, liked that it kept him busy, liked that it paid well, liked the social interaction with other criminals, and the respect that he got. And I think that became more important than anything else. And I think he just really enjoyed being, a scumbag criminal. And I think that that would have continued, or he will try to make that continue, because he honestly enjoys what he does. And while I believe it started for the money, and he is very greedy, I also believe that that sort of lifestyle and that respect that he got is what sort of keeps him going. And that's why he even said, I don't care about the money anymore. I'm going to do this until I have 1 million victims. Like these are senseless goals. He
Yeah.
just wanted to be in that place and stay at the top, and continue, which shows against a little bit what I said with the ego. But he
Ego
definitely
and
has an ego.
sociopathy, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. He
Wow.
definitely has an ego. He's just not this flashy guy like he portrays
Right.
himself. But he certainly has an ego, and has a very authoritative energy to the way he holds himself and communicates and presents himself with other people.
Wow. Wow. So you think, just to summarize what you said, basically, you think this guy, there was no retirement plan. He's just,
There's
uh,
never a retirement plan.
yeah, that's
It's
crazy. That's crazy.
mhm.
And we have a saying at Group Sense about egos. We say egos are expensive, right? We have a poster that says this, right? Like you can have one,
Right.
but it's going to cost you one way or the other. And I guess it eventually it cost him, right? Or
Yeah. Well, for him to
it's
go
costing him
away,
right now, right?
it is. For him to
Yeah.
go away, it's going to be because he's forced to, because life is so difficult, or other events are taking place, that it has to make it not worth it for him to do it anymore. I honestly thought this would be it, and hopefully it will be. Based on the sanctions, less money will come in. People won't want to work for him when it's easier to work for other groups, and hopefully it will make him insignificant. And that, far more than any sort of money, will be the biggest, effect and the most traumatic aspect to, Dmitry, handling this, because that's what's important to him.
Wow. Wow,
So
man.
interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, and maybe just a couple quick final questions, and then maybe we will go to some questions from the attendees and stuff. So just judging based on what we just talked about, it feels like you're pretty happy with the outcome. Are you happy about where this went and how this ended. And then a second part of that question is, you put a fair number of technical IOCs in all of these. And, I know in Ransomware Diaries 5, you were kind of rushed on those. Is there more that you've held back because you weren't able to validate that maybe we're still going to release, and that sort of thing?
Yes, there are more. So if you recall in the Ransomware Diaries, there is a big Maltego graph, and it has all these connections to accounts and domains and IOCs and things like that. It's probably now twice the size of that. That's the research I'm working on now for sort of a part two, assuming I find some good connections. But there's definitely more there. That it's grown substantially. One of the reasons it's grown is I've had third-party vendors that have just helped me and given me, temporary access to their resources, domain tools, Team Cumru, have given me access to pivot off of things and to use things. And I've found a lot more information. And what I'm going to do is I'm trying to pivot off of that, and I'm going to go off, compare that to other research that's already been put out. And I'm going to go also compare that to some of the accounts and activity that I found from them, and just see what I have when I'm done and what dots I can connect. But yes, there's definitely more IOCs than what are in that report. And people have been able to pivot off some of those IOCs. Brian Krebs came out with a report about a week after the one I had, and identified some other new things as well. So there's definitely value, I think, in putting that out. It doesn't matter if it's me or someone else. If putting that out helps and people find things, that's what's important. But if you do use the stuff when I put it out, I put that out an hour after the indictment. What I do get rubbed the wrong way is where people take that, they use it, they find new things, great, but they don't cite back the work that I had done on that. And it's like, I've put so much work into this, at least give me a shout out. And I almost want to shout out for putting this out. We make it free. We share it. It's my blood, sweat, and tears.
He's not sleeping, people. Come on, man. Like, give him a shout out.
Right. Right.
Well, just in summary, it's amazing work. I think it's meaningful work. Also, I think, just going back to the book and the sort of the tools, just watching that in action and how you put those tools to work is super cool for somebody who's a practitioner in the space. I know my analyst team, thinks you're the leader in this space. Like they follow you every day in all the stuff you're doing. So awesome job, man. And I guess I don't know if the format is we just open it up for a question. I know there's one question in the box. There might be more. I'm going to answer this one or ask this one live. Anne Vroom asked, do you think LockBit is presently working with the Russian government vis-a-vis Ukraine? And she also said that you're doing awesome work, which, I agree.
Well, thank you, Anne. Yeah, so whether he was previously, I don't think he was doing work with the government. But what happens when you get indicted in Russia is you get the attention of the FSB, and they usually show up and knock at the door. And they have a keen interest in significant players within the ransomware community. And that's for a whole different conversation, but there's other research on that shows that exists. So I have no doubt that unless he disappeared, got out of that house before, they could visit him and disappeared somewhere, I definitely think at a minimum they're looking for him. But yeah, I would imagine there's been some conversations. Now, when they do that it doesn't necessarily mean that this person goes and like full-time works for them. What it does mean though is that they do have now a handler who checks in with them, and they do have someone who, they basically want to have their thumb on key people in different elements so that when they do need resources, they can utilize those or for intelligence purposes. So I do believe that at a minimum, there's been a knock on the door and some conversations. At most, yeah, that they could be interested in having him work for them. We saw with both Bogachev and Yakubets, after they were indicted, they actually went to work full time for the FSB.
Right.
I haven't seen evidence that that's happened with Dmitry at this point, but he'd be, perfect fit for that story, done again. So it wouldn't surprise me if we saw that happen.
It's quite a job interview you just went through, right?
Right. Not one I'd want to be part of.
You're right. Just a draft off of Anne's question. I mean, I've always thought, and this, I don't really have any data to back this up, but maybe you have an opinion. because the sort of standard operating procedure of the ransomware actors is the double extortion, and they're exfiltrating a significant amount of data. I've always felt that sort of unofficial amnesty that's been awarded them by their home country, Russia, that there's some quid pro quo for that. And one of those that I've always, sort of been paranoid about is that, maybe the FSB gets a copy of any of that data that they need. What are your thoughts on that?
I think when it comes to intelligence agencies, they have access to a lot of things that you wouldn't expect, and most people won't know even if they're compromised. But when it comes to all the data that that the reason that ransomware is attractive to intelligence agencies, is especially the FSB, is because of two things. They do often target government defense contractors, key corporations that can affect the U.S. economy, things like that, where there would obviously be a vested interest by an adversarial government. The other side, though, to that is, we saw it again. I can't say this with LockBit, but we saw this with previous variants of ransomware, where key people were taken. And let's use this is way back, but let's use Bogachev. When he was arrested, he was using Game Over Zeus, and he made a modified version of it that would search for keywords that were all related to foreign government intelligence agencies, and they targeted them with it. And so it's the same thing. We saw Conti. There was a modified version of it called Cyto. It was never seen publicly used in attack, but it was clearly repurposed for intelligence gathering purposes, and all the keywords were related to government entities that were adversarial to Russia. So certainly those things do take place, and that could be a scenario that we see play out in the future. Time will tell, but they have a vested interest, and that's a fact at this point. That's not an opinion. So I can't imagine that LockBit wouldn't be an interest, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I've always, been paranoid about the potentially exabytes of like exfiltrated data from private, public, organizations around the world that these guys have access to. And up until fairly recently, I think one of the things we had going for us was it's almost too much data to sift through, right? Like it's a tremendous amount of data. But you think about applying things like LLMs and generative AI to that data, to find the nuggets that are useful, and for perhaps seeding a cyber attack against the West or something like that. It becomes pretty scary proposition.
Yeah. Yeah, you put a lot of big data together, you can make lots of correlations, and you can use that, whether it's for further access or for intelligence purposes, or you can repurpose it and inject it with other false data and spin a narrative on it, which is one of the main things Russia does. So all of that is
propaganda machine, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so there's lots of ways that the government could benefit from it. It's just getting evidence to show how much they do or don't that has been the tricky part the past couple of years.
Well, great. I don't know if we have any other questions. I wanted to, I got to ask this just because, I care about you as a human being. Do you worry about your own well-being and safety?
Of course. There are times it's worse than others, but I've had in my career, I have everything from, confirmed threats of violence to things more minimal like swatting. It's just the life that I live, but it's why I say I won't be able to do what I do today forever, because it takes a toll on you, and it's why I
and your
need
family and your I hear you, man. I hear you.
But it doesn't deter me. It just pisses me off when they do that. And when they do threaten me like that, people think I'm crazy, because I go back at them 5 times harder than I would have if they didn't. And I'm not going to give specific examples here, but it really pisses me off when people threaten me. I'm not just going to back down. It motivates me to find out who they are, so that they'll know, you can come screw with me, but I know who you are and where you live too. That sounds crazy, but I have a crazy job. So, but I try to never be adversarial. I'm always respectful. I've never had to go there to threaten a threat actor. But yeah, I will put out way more information, and I will dig and make it like my life mission if I think this person is going to cause me all this stress and threaten me and things of that nature. I feel like if I back down, if I show fear, any of those, they win. And it's easy to say, it's a lot harder to do. and I've had to do it now several times. But that's why this, doing this work isn't for everybody, and I get that, and that's okay. I mean, I am an adrenaline I am a adrenaline junkie. I live for this stuff, but it does get old and tiring
Yeah.
after a while. But I could never be just like a system administrator somewhere. Not there's anything wrong with that. I started my career out in IT, and I'm just like, there's days where I'm like, why can't I just have a normal job? But as a
Right.
whole, like I love what I do, and I can't
Yeah.
imagine doing anything different. But someday I will do a different version of this. Maybe, I'll lead a team that does it. Maybe I'll do something different. But I won't be able to do this forever. But I definitely am not done yet. Still got a lot of work to do.
Well, yeah, and thank you for that and the sacrifice. We don't have a question, but a comment. I got to read it because it's great. It says, John is a great person that even the threat actors I've talked with told me good things about him. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. I agree 100%. And I guess the message to the bad guys is like, don't mistake that good naturedness for weakness, right?
Yeah. Well, and I normally don't have to. Most of them are respectful
Yeah.
with me. It's just a couple bad seeds where things
Sure.
go wrong, but most of them, they're respectful. I'm respectful, and they're, again, legitimate relationships. So I'm glad that's good feedback to know that that's my goal. So thank you.
And just piped up and asked if you're going to do any speaking engagements in the DC metro area anytime soon. And how do we know
Uh,
you're a threat actor and that you're going to ambush John at a speaking engagement?
if a threat actor comes, they need to just make sure they let me know so we can do some photos together. So in DC, I'm probably going to, me and Azim from Cisco Talos are going to put in a joint presentation for CFP for Nova B-Sides. That's in September. I don't know if we'll see if we get accepted or not. And while not in DC, my odds are slim, but I have applied to DEF CON. It's kind of a bucket list thing, so I'm really hoping I get in for that. But a lot of the conferences I do like come up, or if I'm asked to do them, they'll come up, short term, like, can you do this, in a couple weeks type of thing. But yeah, I'll definitely let folks know if I have any more in DC. I try to talk as much as I can at conferences that are local, because those are easy to get to and to do. But I also got to make sure I have content for them, and
Sure.
I don't want to do the same talk at all the different conferences.
Yeah.
So TBD, but at least B-Sides in Nova B-Sides in Northern Virginia, I'll go to, or DC, anything in DC, I'll go to. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you again. And, go check out Analyst One. They make sure John can do what he does. They're subsidizing this. So, check out Analyst One and keep an eye on John on X, I guess, not Twitter anymore, X.
X.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.